And we'd like to now welcome up our final member of the panel, Francis Simmons from Atlantic 58 and the University of Highlands and Islands, Outer Hebrides, to discuss EIA methodology for social attitudes and impacts in islands and rural coastal communities, a topic near and dear to my heart. Welcome, Francis. Grab my pen.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for hosting me, and to the previous speakers as well. My brain's now full of more topics and more details that I'm going to try and not delve into because I haven't got a huge amount of time, but it all relates very closely to the work we've been doing. So what I'm going to do in this presentation is just introduce you to a case study and a process that we're developing relating to social impact assessment. And it touches on rural and island community experiences of impacts arising from development at all stages, including decommissioning. Although I should say decommissioning is a little bit of a grey area for us because we're based on in the Outer Hebrides, so that's a relatively undeveloped part of the marine environment currently. I'm also going to touch on community engagement and how attitudes and impacts kind of interact in relation to climate change adaptation infrastructure. So we're working with the University of the Highlands and Islands on this project. We received an innovation voucher from Innovate UK to partner up our environmental consultancy with an academic team. So just a little bit about ourselves. We're an environmental consultancy based on the Isle of Lewis. We work on a range of projects, EIA, SIA, project design. I'm sure you're very familiar with our line of work, so I won't talk too much about that, but we do work with a variety of clients, including big corporations, community, academia, and the crofting community is included in that. So it's quite a sort of unique setting to be doing environmental consultancy in. And we're quite proud of the fact that we're based in the communities that we're representing and working for. So this is where we are, in case anyone wasn't already familiar with where the Isle of Lewis is. It's up there on the northwest of Scotland. We are a highly rural environment. You're probably familiar with the sort of character of the Outer Hebrides. I'm not sure if anyone's been there, but if you have, you'll know it's very scenic. It has a huge amount of cultural heritage, including one of the biggest, most important Gaelic communities in the UK. It's got a variety of fragile ecosystems within it and habitats, such as the Macha, peatlands. There are important seabird migration routes, and so on. And it's often described as being peripheral or remote, which I'll just bust that myth. A lot of people are kind of object to that characterization as it sort of decenters their existence and the sense of being in relation to the Atlantic or in relation to the west coast of Scotland, rather than, say, Edinburgh or London. So we're also obviously right on the edge of the Atlantic, so we take the brunt of the storms that come in, which obviously makes us very windy. So the islands have been identified as a hotspot for renewable development, as I'm sure you know, particularly wind energy. But grid expansion there faces a number of challenges, and it's a big conversation at the moment in the islands. Okay. And very quickly, we're working with the University of the Highlands and Islands Centre for Living Sustainably, which is focused on inclusive sustainable development and participatory engagement. So obviously that's helping us with engaging with communities in the work that we're doing. Okay, so the challenge that we're trying to address with the process that we're developing is to develop processes for social impact assessment that respond to guidance which increasingly advises place-based approaches and the use of social science theory to get a better understanding of how impacts would be likely to play out. And Kate also touched on engagement with community and reflecting values that aren't just coming from one sort of dynamic. So we're trying to respond to the challenge that social impacts can be hard to quantify, or that they're overly focused on the more quantifiable aspects, such as economic growth, and also responding to the fact that engagement is often seen as being expensive and difficult to manage. So all of this is kind of being taken into the process that we're trying to develop. There's also a challenge in that islands are often impacted differently by large development projects due to a number of specific challenges, including the more tangible issues of connectivity, but also the less tangible impacts related to the context of cultural marginality, different social norms, historical context, and different dynamics in terms of power relations and land ownership. So we're trying to develop an SIA methodology that takes into account these challenges, which is holistic, participatory, and place-based. And a lot of findings have come out of this work. So ideally, we're aiming to improve the process. We're aiming to improve trust through transparency, and ultimately aiming for community resilience and empowerment. And that's partly through, mainly through the participation of lesser heard voices. There are a few sort of objectives that respond to the needs of developers as well. If we understand the impacts better in a specific context, we should be better able to avoid or mitigate negative impacts, and also judge what the equitable sort of return should be. Involving multiple stakeholders is always beneficial, and in terms of construction and operation, it should offer better value for money, because you can avoid bad decisions and problems that arise from community opposition, or issues later in the process relating to the environment. Okay, so what we've done so far is just a small part of the process. So far we've just developed some more holistic, we think, criteria for assessing sensitivity and magnitude in the EIA process. So those relate to receptors that, I should actually say we've been doing this in tandem with some EIA work and some SIA work that we've been doing in relation to offshore wind, as well as other projects like aquaculture and other key developments in the Western Isles. So a lot of this has come out of focus groups and interviews and a literature review that has been specifically focused on a particular wind farm that's been proposed, and the one that's generating the most kind of response on the island. So the receptors that we've identified are very much specific to that development, but because it's quite a large development, it's fairly holistic, so it covers a huge amount of more than you would for a fish farm or a smaller development. And in terms of magnitude criteria, there's been, I mean, the criteria we've developed for magnitude have been a little bit less, we've put less focus into that, but more into looking at the nature of impacts. Okay. So through these, the engagement work particularly, that has drawn out some sort of key findings that relate to attitudes in particular. So our findings reflect the literature, to be honest, so it's not particularly groundbreaking stuff, but the theory we've used to underpin the work has come from place attachment theory. So we've been looking at the emotional bonds between people and places, and a large part of the conversation that we've had has related to landscape character, a huge amount to do with the context and the community's previous experience of development, which has contributed to issues around trust in decision makers, and also the strategies for engagement, particularly when engagement occurs. I think that can drive attitudes towards developments. A thread that runs between the work we've done and the decommissioning issues is probably related to what a lot of people have been talking about already this morning, which is the kind of ecosystem, so the sort of eco-cultural turn that how people relate to their environment drives their understanding of how impacts will play out. So our next steps, and part of the reason that I came to present was to just say we're still working on this project, so we're seeking feedback at this stage on the criteria that we've developed. So if anyone is interested in having a look at what we've created so far, then please get in touch. We will be then sort of road testing those criteria in some relevant chapters of EIA for some island projects, including the one I mentioned. A gap in our understanding really is around how the approach to understanding impacts of decommissioning interacts with social attitudes that might change over time. So at this point where a project hasn't happened, how do you address decommissioning when the presence of that structure will inevitably create impacts that then need to be addressed again later on, if that makes sense. So that's me, if anyone wants to get in touch, and thanks very much.